समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of ThePrint Security Code. For days now, we've been seeing an intense global discussion about rare earth minerals after China cut supplies to the global market and the United States has threatened that it will impose very severe tariffs from the 1st of November. We don't know how this is eventually going to play out, but there's a really important story that hasn't got much attention. How did China end up with this rare earths monopoly in the first place? It's a strange story which has a great deal to do with miscalculations made during the Cold War by the United States, but also by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's India. The life-size diorama at the Inner Mongolia Museum records the beginning of this story. Loading his ox cart, a shepherd guides his family to a new life far from the grasslands of his people, a sacrifice for the glorious quest to make his nation a great power. Local newspapers were full of similar iconography as the new People's Republic of China sought to secure its revolution with iron, steel, and nuclear weapons. There were pictures of young ethnic Han women who had arrived to map the resources of the region, and these socialist realist images of industrial workers driving back imperialism with the might of their lathes and milling machines. Last week, after China imposed new restrictions on the export of rare earth elements, which are indispensable to make everything from electric car motors, missile components, and computer chip fabrication machines, US President Donald Trump has vowed to impose counter tariffs. He's even threatened to cancel an upcoming trade summit meeting with his counterpart, President Xi Jinping. The strange part of the story is this: the reason China ended up with this chokehold on rare earths is that it was gifted to the People's Republic by the United States. Even less known, as I mentioned, is the role India played in ensuring that the US was pushed to turn to China. As the journalist Justin Rowland notes, the 17 rare earth minerals, you can look them up on a periodic table, aren't actually rare. There are abundant supplies. Yet misguided policies allowed them to become the cause of the geopolitical crisis we now face. From early in the 1950s, engineers in both the United States and the Soviet Union realized that rare earth elements offered a way to move beyond the technological cul-de-sac reached in aviation design at the end of World War II. Tungsten iron alloys were unstable at the kinds of high temperatures jet engines and fuselages were now encountering. In addition, they were prone to corrosion and extremely bulky. Light alloys made with rare earth metals offered a solution. And applications for rare earths soon emerged in radar, batteries, magnets, televisions, and computer hard drives. Like their counterparts in the West, Soviet engineers began to explore the miraculous properties of these new materials. This eventually led to a Russia-China pact to cooperate on developing the Bayan-Obo iron thorium rare earth mine near the town of Baotou in Inner Mongolia, beginning from 1951. From 1956, China became concerned that the Soviet Union was denying it nuclear weapons-related technologies and set up its own program under the eminent Beijing University chemist Xu Guangxian. The geographer Julie Klinger's magnificent work on rare earths shows the US made a similar outreach to India. Facing famine in the years after independence, India sought food aid from the United States. The government of President Harry Truman proposed turning a $190 million gift into a loan repayable with monazite, which was critical to America's nuclear program. India needs grain immediately. We have the grain, influential Congressman John Voorhees declared. We need strategic materials from India over a period of years. India has those materials. We should make India a loan which can be repaid in strategic materials. Arguing that the conditionality would undermine Indian sovereignty, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru first responded by rejecting the proposal outright. Likely at the urging of nuclear bomb program chief turned anti-nuclear activist Robert Oppenheimer, he then allowed some strategic materials to be exported, but not those which might be of use to the United States nuclear weapons program. This meant things like thorium and monazite were off the table. Then, an unexpected development freed the US from having to look for rare earth in the far corners of the globe. In 1949, 3 prospectors sought uranium in the Clark Mountain Range in California, where miners had once risked their lives prospecting for gold, silver, copper, zinc, lead, and antimony. The uranium prospectors struck bastnasite, which contains rare earth elements used to make magnets in everything from speakers to mobile phones. Ever since the late 19th century, prospectors had arrived from around the world seeking their fortune in the mountains of California and Arizona. The risks were not small. In several cases, the historian Lawrence Fong writes, Chinese prospectors were killed by Native Americans, seen as, I quote, fine subjects for scalping, as their hair was shaved close to the crown of the head and then tied in a pigtail. The Chinese miners also had to face intense racism. From 1882 on, Chinese laborers were formally banned from immigrating under new race-based laws. From 1951, though, the Mountain Pass mine overcame these adversities and began to become one of the world's most important sources of rare earths. It was soon supplying over 70% of both American and global demand. The mine was acquired by the petrochemical giant Unocal in 1977. There seemed to be no possible challenge to its global dominance. But then it suddenly choked and died. Late in the 1960s, you see, President Richard Nixon's brother Edward Nixon, a graduate of Duke University's Geological Sciences program, drove the creation of the powerful Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, which is meant, as the name suggests, to protect America's environment. As the leading consultant to American companies on environmental issues, Edward Nixon pointed out that all rare earth elements can cause organ damage if inhaled or ingested. 5 of those rare earths, promethium, gadolinium, terbium, thulium, and holmium, were so toxic that they needed very special handling equipment. Edward offered corporations a solution which minimized the risk of lawsuits and also dovetailed with his brother's famous outreach to China. Early in the 1980s, as Unocal's rare earth operations came under growing EPA scrutiny in America, he offered the company an option, the means to ship its ores to China for processing. Later, Edward's companies arranged for the transfer of magnet production to China and organized the import of rare earth oxides back into the United States after much of the most dangerous processing. For a time, this appeared to be a magical arrangement. American companies were freed of the dangers of engaging in life-threatening industrial processes and could purchase cheap rare earth products from China. The Chinese, in turn, claimed in a 1979 paper, which was acquired by the CIA and is now declassified, that all the money generated by rare earth processing was consolidating the socialist revolution. The people of Inner Mongolia, of course, paid a hideous price for this commercial success. The Bagang tailings dam, where effluents from rare earth refining ran into, soon grew into a lake containing 200 million liters of radioactive slurry, Klinger records. Women workers in Bautu's smelting plants were found by doctors to have significantly higher rates of complications in pregnancies and their children of congenital birth defects. From 1990, disturbing evidence also began to emerge of a sharp spike in respiratory cancers. Local reporters began to write about the situation, even at the risk of official displeasure. Around the dam, Lu Guangshu recorded, Sheep have suffered from long tooth disease, villagers are suffering from cancer, and this once fertile vegetable garden has become a place where seeds do not grow and the water cannot be drunk. The residents of the region also began voicing their grievances. A local nomad told Klinger that Bayan Obo was revered by Mongolians and considered a sacred mountain. Thus, as mining expanded into that mountain, no one really wanted to leave since it was so important for their heritage. Later though, the villagers said, I quote, the animals got sick, then the babies, and then everybody else. Local authorities were finally forced to confront the pollution fallout from around 2010. Government census records removed farmers and pastoralists as a category, thus criminalizing grazing and relieving authorities of any responsibility for what happened. I quote, the demolished remains of the once notorious cancer villages were scattered among rusting pipes and dilapidated warehouses, journalist Amy Hawkins reported earlier this year. One overgrown, abandoned dumpling restaurant was the only evidence that communities used to live here. The nomads continued to live in the area in some numbers, reluctant to become low-wage labor in the cities. Those I interviewed stated that they preferred risking an early death beneath their own sky to working as a day laborer on the margins of a far-off big city, Klinger writes. From Australia's Enaba to São Gabriel de Cachoeira in Brazil, companies are now again tapping massive rare earth deposits outside China, following in the path of Mountain Pass. For its part, India has moved a little more cautiously on its own substantial deposits, wanting to be certain it doesn't end up facing the massive human costs that China had to suffer. In a few years, the rare earth shortages that have allowed China to blackmail the world should be a thing of the past. But the story holds out an important lesson about how misplaced government policies and corporate greed can collude to create strategic crisis. Although it's much too late to avert the hardships that artificial rare earth shortage will inflict on the global economy, learning the right lessons could avert even more serious problems to come. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.